Hey, welcome to the complete Geb guide for Season 6. If you want to be a part of polls to choose who gets to be the next guide, then consider becoming a channel member using the join button below, but let's get right into the contents of this guide. So as always, we'll kick it off with Geb's basic playstyle and overview, then all of his abilities in depth and the best ways to use them. After that, items and builds, where I'll discuss my favourite item pickups for Geb and example builds. And finally, we'll close out the guide with some tips and tricks to up your game on Geb. Alright, so let's dive right into it with the basic overview. So Geb is your quintessential support guardian. He likes to play quite defensive and protect his team for the most part, but he's definitely capable of engaging and being aggressive in the right situation as well. He excels most in full-scale teamfights where he can hit multiple enemies with his AoE crowd control and keep key teammates alive with the use of his stone shield to give them extra health and cleanse crowd control. Being a guardian, Geb excels most for the support role in Conquest, but he does also see some play in the solo lane as well, where he can farm up effectively and play a bit more aggressive in teamfights, because you have a true support god in the support role as well in that case. Being Geb solo enables a different type of playstyle for him, but we'll get into that later in the build section. So with Geb's basics covered, let's go into all of his abilities in depth and how to use them most effectively. So Geb's passive is incredibly simple. He takes only 25% bonus damage on crits instead of the normal 100%, so a 1.25 times damage rather than the usual double damage that crits would deal when you're playing Geb. This isn't really a passive you need to pay attention to in game, more so out of game when you're thinking about picking Geb, but it really depends on what the meta is for hunter builds and things like that. If crit is very popular, then Geb becomes a little bit better, but even in non-crit metas, Geb can still be extremely strong. This passive is more of just a nice boost for him. He also becomes very strong against comps with gods like Mercury, as well as double hunter comps with multiple of them building crit. Moving on to Geb's 1, Rollout. This is Geb's only form of mobility, and it's not your typical dash. Basically, you start rolling and speed up as you roll until you reach a top speed after 3 seconds of rolling. At top speed, you become CC immune, and if you hit an enemy god, you will knock them back, not up, and the ability ends. And for the entire ability, you will go through and deal damage to minions. If you hit an enemy god while you're not at top speed, you instead just slow them and the amount of damage is reduced. So this is a sort of awkward movement ability since it's extremely slow when starting up, and you can also be slowed even further while charging it up before you get that CC immunity. So I wouldn't rely on this too much, especially against a comp with heavy slows or on-demand cripples, but for the most part this can be a solid escape or engage tool if used in the right way. Geb's 2, Shockwave, is a cone AoE damage and knock-up in front of Geb. This will knock up regardless of range, but the further away a target is from you, the less damage the ability deals, which caps out at half damage at max range on the ability. There's not too much else to say about this ability really. It's fairly simple, but definitely very powerful as a setup and peel tool. The knock-up is fairly short, it's not on the level of like a backer swap for example, but it can be great for disrupting enemies and or cancelling channeled abilities such as Artio's life tap. However, it's important to note that a lot of channeled abilities in Smite are knock-up immune, like Thor's 3 or Anubis' 1 or Nike's 1 for example, but in the case where you can interrupt something with Shockwave, it can be very powerful if used that way. This ability is also Geb's main source of wave clear throughout the early game, as it can hit the full wave comfortably, even if the archers take a little bit less damage due to the damage fall off of the ability at range. Moving on to probably Geb's most iconic ability, Stone Shield. Geb can target any allied god, which includes himself, and place a stone shield on them with 50 up to 250 health plus 20 health per level of Geb. This caps out at 650 health at level 20 and max rank, and will last 3 seconds to 5 seconds depending on the ability rank. Also, another lesser known fact, because it's not made immediately obvious when you first start playing Geb, is that the shield will cleanse CC when placed on an ally. This is different to CC immunity, it will just remove any CCs, hard or soft, that are currently affecting the ally you put the shield on as a one-time buff. Any further CCs, or CCs that will reapply themselves, like the slow on Anubis' Grasping Hands for example, will still affect you. So this ability is the quintessential Geb ability, even more so than his ultimate. I think when you say Geb, a lot of people think of this shield. The ability to just shield teammates is basically unmatched by any other Guardian, and allows your teammates to play in a way that they wouldn't normally, or get away with things that they wouldn't normally be able to get away with, and get out of situations that would normally be an instant death simply because they have a Geb. So use this ability wisely and try not to waste it just to block 100 damage or something. If you can, then try to utilise the cleanse on this ability as well. It's highly underutilised by newer Geb players and can be life versus death if your carry's beads are down and they get hard CC'd. Removing that CC could definitely save their life. Alright, so let's cover Geb's final ability, his ultimate, Cataclysm. So just like the shield, this ability is also quite iconic to Geb. Essentially, after a short wind-up, you stun everyone in a pretty large AoE around you and do % current health magical damage to them. so this damage can be mitigated and it will do less damage the further the enemy is from full health. The stun scales up to 2 seconds at max rank, which can be life ending if it's not cleansed, so this can be a great engage or follow-up engage tool for Geb that can hold multiple enemies in place for your team to pump damage into. There's not too much more I can say about this ability really, just watch for people's movement abilities as they might be able to dodge this with it, and then slam it down on as many people as you can as possible in a team fight. Alright, so with abilities covered, let's move on to Geb's build options. So for this section, I'll be covering support and solo builds since they differ quite a lot depending on where you want to play Geb. For the most part, he's a support god, but he definitely can work as a solo laner on the right composition, so I'm going to cover that angle of attack here as well. So starting with support, for your starter build, you of course want Guardian's Blessing for the early sustain and gold generation, it's sort of essential for supports. Then from there, my favourite choice right now is grabbing tier 1 boots and potions. This allows you to get your full boots online early for the mobility and stats, plus it gives you 300 gold left over to buy as many potions as you need for sustain in the duo lane. As for which choice of boots, I think your main two options right now for support are Reinforced Shoes and Shoes of Focus. Which one you want is really more preference on if you want to be very tanky early on, or if you want a bit more damage and that 10% CDR, it's really up to you. Then for the rest of your build, you want to go as tanky as possible, with aura items and a bit of CDR in there as well. So as I just mentioned, all 3 aura items are great for support Geb. So Gauntlet of Thebes, Sovereignty and Heartward Amulet, since they give defense to your other teammates as well. If you need additional magical defense, I recommend Genji's Guard, or if the enemy team has a healer, then get Pestilence of course for that anti-heal. If you're in need of some more physical defense, I can definitely recommend Midgardian Mail against auto attackers or Emperor's Armor if you feel you need that extra structure power. For mixed defense, Spirit Robe and Mantle of Discord are both amazing item pickups later on in your build. The passives are invaluable when you're getting CC'd or heavily focused down, and the defense provided is against both types, so you can't really go wrong with these two. I'll also quickly mention Magi's Cloak since we're on the cloak tree here. It's not an auto build in every game like the previous 2 items can be, but if you feel yourself being heavily focused out by hard CC to the point where you're dying before you can be useful, then Magi's can help with that for sure. Relic Dagger is also coming into support builds a bit recently, and with its buff in the upcoming mid-season patch, I think it might be a real choice for supports due to the high impact relics that you can pick up. And finally, Stone of Binding can be a nice aggressive second or third item pickup since you can easily proc its passive with your knockups to reduce enemy protections. But keep in mind that this is more of an early game bridge item and not something you really want later in your build, and you shouldn't be keeping it into the late game either, you should sell it for something better. As for support relics for Geb, I highly recommend getting Blink somewhere, usually in second slot, but you can try it in first as well. This allows you to engage very effectively with either Blink Cataclysm or Blink Shockwave, that can be effective as well. As for your second relic, I would usually pick between Shell and Heavenly Wings based on how you like to play and what you think the team needs. Both are great team-wide relics. Okay, so let's cover a full build example for supports before we move on to some solo lane build options. Start with Guardian's Blessing, tier 1 shoes, 3 health and 3 multi-potions. Finish your shoes into Reinforced Shoes, then grab Gauntlet of Thebes, Sovereignty, Genji's Guard, Spirit Robe, sell your Blessing for Mantle of Discord, and then if the game goes long enough, you can sell your boots for Relic Dagger and get the Elixir of Speed. Your 2 relics for support should be Blink and Shell. Alright, so with that done, let's move on to some solo lane build paths. So for starting builds in solo, you usually want Guardian's Blessing. This is due to Geb's bad early clear and passive playstyle in the solo lane. You're better off with Guardian's Blessing and passively getting that gold than going for a Warrior's Blessing. Then for the most part in solo lane, you just want to jam as much health sustain as possible into your build, so I like Health Chalice and 4 or 5 health potions, and then just float the rest of your gold for when you're back to base to get boosts. Mana sustain is basically taken care of in solo lane by MP5, Totem and blue buff, so you really don't need mana potions. Your boots of choice for solo lane Geb are a little bit different than support in that you usually want Shoes of the Magi for early penetration and damage coming from solo. This helps out your early clear and trading potential with the enemy solo laner a lot. But I have seen some people lean towards cooldown reduction boots as well in solo, so that's an option if you prefer that. From there, you need to be building to counter your lane opponent and the enemy team in general when coming from solo. Your first 2 items almost always want to be Breastplate of Valor and Voidstone. The order will change depending on if you're facing a physical or magical lane opponent, so Breastplate first against physical, Voidstone first against magical. But these 2 items combined give plenty of both types of defense, some health, CDR, and a bit of extra damage as well. The one case where I would say this isn't true is if you want to replace Voidstone with Pestilence against a healer solo laner like Hel or Aphrodite. Some other good items are of course the usual Spirit Robe and Mantle of Discord for general purpose defense against both types of damage and their useful passives. Just watch for overcapping CDR if you're building breastplate with these, since that plus these two is already full CDR, which is another reason why I do like to go pen boots over cooldown reduction boots on Geb solo. Magi's Blessing is once again a good defensive option if you're being focused down by hard CC, but is less necessary in solo than in support due to generally being more tanky and higher level throughout the game. Ethereal Staff is my go-to damage item for Geb solo. It doesn't interfere with your cooldown reduction and still provides some tankiness with the health, but also some nice damage too, which is more important coming from solo lane. Midgardia Mail is great for dealing with heavy auto attack based comps like Double Hunter or Hunter with Kali Jungle for example. I also like Jade Emperor's Crown a lot too for physical defense. It's sort of a more aggressive version of Sovereignty, which your support will likely already have, and being a solo laner, you can get up in multiple enemies' faces and apply that power reduction aura, which can be great for Geb solo. That's it for regular items. As for your relics, these are pretty much non-negotiable for solo lane. You need Teleport first for solo, because that's just kind of a given, and Blink is still Geb's best relic for being able to engage and maneuver in fights. Alright, so let's cover that Geb solo full build before we finish off the guide with some Geb tips and tricks. So start with Guardian's Blessing, Health Chalice, and 4 health potions. Grab Shoes of the Magi, Breastplate of Valor, then Void Stone, swapping the order of these two if needed, Spirit Robe, Ethereal Staff, and sell your Blessing for Mantle of Discord. If the game goes that long, you can also sell your boots for Midgardian Mail or any other situational defense item you feel you need, and grab the Elixir of Speed. Your 2 relics should be Teleport first and then Blink. Okay, let's round out the guide with a few general tips and tricks to up your play on Geb. So it takes a bit of practice to get the timing right on Geb's rollout for when you go CC immune and get that knockback effect. So if you are chasing a target, you may want to instead cancel the ability just before you hit them, just to avoid potentially going yellow at the last millisecond and knocking the enemy even further away from your team. Also, on the topic of rollout, it's often okay to just use this at point blank range to apply the slow and the bit of damage if you don't think you're going to need the chase potential from it. It also works great as an AA cancel, but that's not terribly relevant on a Guardian for the most part. Another tip, you aren't camera locked while casting Shockwave, so you can turn the camera during the cast animation to change the direction of the Shockwave. This can be pretty neat since you can be running away from someone, activate the ability and quickly 180 during the cast animation and still hit your pursuer with the knockup. You can also just generally use this to prevent people juking the ability or to switch targets if you decide mid-cast that you want to hit someone else with the ability, rather than the initial target you thought you wanted to hit. Also, this isn't really a tip, more so just a reminder that Geb shield cleanses. I'm mainly just saying this because I see a lot of people waste the shield and then see their teammates die to a stun that could have been easily cleansed with the shield. Always be on the lookout for potential cleanse opportunities with this ability. But that's all I've got for the complete Season 6 Geb guide. Hope you guys enjoyed and learned some new things from this one. If you did, then don't forget to drop a like before you leave and maybe share it around with your friends. But that's it from me. I'll catch you guys in another video later. Have a great day and peace out, you nerds.